there's only one man battling the forces of evil. They are coming.
No!
They will find you.
No!
They will search for answers no one has dared to go. To save the world, there is only one.
To be the man! You gotta beat the man!
He is legend.
Oh, let me tell you about it, folks. So I'm going to be presenting this new, it's a new Darlie. It's by Unpredictable. We're going to present it, and I'm just going to go through a little bit of it here while I have my lunch. Let's talk about it.
Before we start with the video, we want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Private Internet Access VPN. Every time you connect to the internet, even at home, your data can be intercepted by your ISP, advertisers, or anyone who's on the same network. I found that while researching videos at a cafe, I kept hitting geoblocks, and worse, I realized I was connected to public Wi-Fi with no protection. PIA VPN stops that. It creates an encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet, hides your IP address, and keeps your browsing truly private. Beyond security, PIA gives you freedom online. With servers in 91 countries in every US state, you can watch shows that normally aren't available where you live simply by changing your virtual location. Part of the reason I use PIA VPN regularly now is to watch movies like Zodiac that aren't available in Canada but are elsewhere. It works seamlessly with all major streaming platforms: Netflix, Disney+, Amazon Prime, and more. Using streaming services without that flexibility is like paying for a 3-course meal and being told you can only eat from the kids menu. PIA works on all major platforms: Windows, Mac OS.
Looking to add a profitable food service option?
No.
Want pizza profits 50%?
Trying desperately.
Okay.
Ma'am, I'm trying to get an ambulance to you. Hang on a minute. What's going on, ma'am?
This is the call 911 operators responded to at 2:31 a.m. on June 6, 1996. A frantic mother, Darlie Routier, screams for help as she finds her sons, 6-year-old Devin and 5-year-old Damon, brutally stabbed in the living room of their North Texas home. Trying desperately to calm the screaming woman down and get information, the operator repeatedly asks Darlie to explain what is going on, but in her shock, all she...
All right, see, it starts right there. After a 1.5-minute long advertisement, she goes into the 911 call that we all know about, and she starts out with Darlie's shock. But we all know that she was given a field shock test by the medic on the porch, where they press in on your thumbnail and they look at the blood return. She was not in shock according to that. Her blood pressure was slightly elevated at 140/80. She was not showing any signs of shock. So that tells me where this is going to go. How this is going to, this channel, how this, it's leaning towards her innocence. When they start out right away with her shock, they use the word frantic and shock.
can keep repeating is...
Oh my God!
Immediately, authorities are called to the scene. There, they are met with what they can only describe as a bloodbath, one of the most grotesque crime scenes they've ever witnessed. Paramedics move into the living room where the attack reportedly occurred. There, they find the reason for the call. 2 boys, 6-year-old Devin and 5-year-old Damon, stabbed repeatedly in the torso and legs, slowly bleeding to death.
Legs?
6-year-old Devin is pronounced dead at the scene, leaving paramedics to shift their focus to 5-year-old Damon, who is somehow still clinging to life. Despite multiple attempts to perform CPR, it becomes clear that Damon's lungs have been punctured during the attack. He dies later that night. With both boys gone, authorities turn their attention to the only known witness to the attack, Darlie herself. Supposedly injured by the same intruder who killed her children, Darlie recounts the events of the night.
Now, they did not turn their attention to Darlie right away. They turned their attention to Darren. When they got him over to Baylor, they photographed him naked. And when they questioned Darlie, they were questioning Darlie about Darren. And she even says in one interview, I can see what they're trying to do. They're trying to implicate Darren. That was an early interview.
From her hospital bed. Little did the police know that in taking her statement, they were stepping into what would become one of the most extensive and controversial homicide investigations in Texas history. An investigation whose outcome would be scrutinized and debated for decades to come.
Rowlett police will continue a 24-hour watch at the crime scene, and investigators will return early Friday morning, looking for any clues that may help them solve this brutal double murder. In Rowlett, Jay Gray, Texas News 5.
For many, Darlie's whole life story would be whittled down to those few hours on the morning of June 6, 1996. But there lived a young woman before the tragedy, and this woman's life and character would profoundly impact how the public would treat her in the years to come. In the 26 years Darlie lived before her life changed completely, she was seen as the quintessential Southern belle. Well-liked, sweet and bubbly, she met her husband Darren at a Western Sizzlin', the restaurant her mother worked at. She was 15.
Darren also worked there, and it was their mother that put those two together, Darlie Key.
He was 17, and they immediately fell in love, getting married at Darren's parents' house 4 years later. From there, life only seemed to improve for the young couple. Darren launched his own electronics business, which quickly became successful, allowing him to bring home a decent income, which would only grow in following years. In 1995, his company's gross revenue was $500,000, making his own take-home salary $125,000.
I think it was a little bit less than $500,000.
To put it into perspective, that's around $260,000 today. The money was coming in quickly, but it seemed that the routiers were spending it even faster. As a young couple in their 20s, in the top 2% tax bracket of their age, they indulged in whatever their hearts desired, whether it was Darren's 1982 Jaguar to drive to work, or an $800 tombstone for Darlie's dearly departed cat. Even the boys were joyful, as the neighborhood kids from all around would call their house the Nintendo house for the elaborate.
Now, see, I've never seen anybody call that the Nintendo house. And they say that the kids were over there all the time. They always hung out there, but there's no video pictures of that. There's pictures of parties that are birthday parties and stuff that are planned, but there's really no pictures of kids just hanging out there. What you have is Devin and Damon playing outside with their little Porsche electric car with Jonathan Gorsuch. Where are all these other kids? Where are they at?
Game room and use it as a local hangout spot. Now you might think the routiers were simply materialistic or showy, but they were also known to be quite generous and kind. Neighbors frequently stated that Darlie would send food and home-cooked meals to sick or mourning families on their street.
I've never heard of this. Neighbors would say that Darlie also gave out sick food for the sick people and even made a mortgage payment for the neighbor, Karen Neal, who died of cancer, actually. But see, we don't know this for a fact. We don't know. We do know that Karen Neal stood beside Darlie no matter what. Wouldn't you?
Even once recalling a time when Darlie made a mortgage payment for a neighbor who was undergoing treatment for cancer. Parents on the street sent their kids to the routier house for playdates all the time and knew that their children would be well taken care of with Darlie and her family.
She says they send them for play dates all the time, but we don't. Where? Where's there any evidence of this? Remember, she hired babysitters for her own kids. She hired housekeepers to clean her house. If she has to have a babysitter for her own kids, Why would they go over to Darlie's for a play date if she's already got a babysitter?
It was a time of abundance for the Routiers. They were well-liked, financially comfortable, and surrounded by a sense of stability. But they had no idea that the life they had worked so hard to build was about to come crashing down. By early 1996, the Routiers were at least 1 month behind on their mortgage payment.
2 months.
They owed $10,000 in back taxes and $22,000 on credit cards. To make matters worse, after the birth of her third son, Drake, Darlie was starting to experience the symptoms of postpartum depression.
Preschool Promise is helping families in Montgomery County find and pay for high.
For many women, the symptoms of postpartum depression are alleviated within months after birth, but for others, these symptoms stick around for much longer and are often
Right, and if you can read Darlie's journal, you can see that it progressed.
left unaddressed, as the stigma surrounding depression in new mothers dissuades many from reaching out for help. In Darlie's case, the symptoms were reaching a boiling point, and on May 3, 1996, around a month before the murders, she wrote this in her diary. Devin, Damon, and Drake, I hope you will forgive me for what I am about to do. My life has been such a hard fight for a long time, and I just can't find the strength to keep fighting anymore. I love you three more than anything else in this world, and I want all three of you to be healthy and happy, and I don't want you to see a miserable person every time you look at me. This excerpt from her diary has been scrutinized from every angle, by Darlie's defense and prosecution alike. Regardless of the many opinions on this note, as time passed, and after a heartfelt discussion with her husband, Darlie reported feeling better, with many stating that she went back to her usual bright and chipper self. But that didn't mean that her problems had been solved. The couple's finances were still a significant concern, and the two were still having hard conversations regarding their financial state, even up until the night before the incident. Now, the events of the night before June 6, 1996, have been heavily debated both in court and beyond, and while no one can say for sure what exactly happened that night, what follows is a recounting of the events as remembered by Darlie. To set the scene, Darren had left the house to drop Darlie's sister off at home. While he was gone, the oldest boys, Damon and Devin.
Now, right there's one problem. Okay, you had the stressors of the car being broke down, the business is failing, money's not coming in like it was. She has to stay at home, and then Darren left on what should be a 15-minute drive with Dana and was gone for 45 minutes. I think that as soon as he came back home, the shit hit the fan. There's accusations about Dana and Darren that went on before and after the conviction. If we know Joe Thermosette, there should be some credibility to the public seeing Darren and Dana hugging and kissing with each other at Six Flags. Now, we know from the past that in the courtroom, you'd see the footage of the galley, the people sitting there. And a lot of times, Dana would be sitting right next to Darren. And Mama Darlie got wind of that and put an end to it. So then later on, you didn't see her sitting with him anymore. Now, we know that Dana, at 16 years old, was living in an apartment with a man. So I speculate that there was some kind of relationship going on between Darren and Dana that added fuel to the fire. But let's listen more.
Brought their blankets to the living room to watch TV with Darlie. When Darren came home, he joined Darlie on the couch to talk before returning upstairs to go to sleep.
Now, the fact that, she says, well, the boys wanted to sleep downstairs. They brought their blankets and stuff to sleep downstairs. But if you listen to Baja Jovel, who's in my interview, Darlie had a planned movie night for that night. Baja asked something about the kids. She said, no, we're having on the day of the murders. She said, no, we're having a movie night tonight to Baja. So she already had it planned during the day, according to Baja, during the day of June 5th, 1996, that the boys were going to sleep downstairs. She even had popcorn made, which adds to what Baja said. We're going to have a movie night. What a better way to have a movie than with some popcorn. But the fact that she had said that around 5:30 that day, no, these kids, we're having a movie night tonight. She already had it planned that they were going to be downstairs.
Darlie fell asleep downstairs with Damon and Devin in front of the TV. From here, I will read out Darlie Routier's testimony of the night her children were murdered in her.
Well, this is not testimony; it's just a written statement. But I want to bring in again. Notice that in this first statement, Darlie doesn't say anything about a separation at all. She doesn't say anything about an argument. Right? In fact, here it says he kissed me and said he loves me. Well, who's going to, kiss their wife and tell them they love her after she's wanted a separation? I told him I love him and see him in the morning. But this statement doesn't mention anything about the sink. It doesn't mention anything about running towels. Neither did Darren's. Running towels back and forth for Devin and Damon. Darlie only changed her statement when she realized that the police had taken the sink out of the house to test it. She had to explain why her blood was in that sink trap and on the inside counter. Why were there footprints going away from the sink but not to it if she made 7 or 8 trips back and forth to Darren and the kids? Also, you have the broken wine glass. She didn't cut her feet. It was right in her path.
Own words. I wake up and feel a pressure on me. I felt Damon press on my right shoulder and heard him cry.
Notice she says, I wake up and feel a pressure on me. The reason that she was on this couch that she gives is because Drake, who had a crib up in the master bedroom with them, would move around in his crib and wake her. That would wake her up. But Damon being stabbed 6 times in his back, inches away from her, did not wake her up. Devin giving mortal wounds to his chest did not wake her up. Only Damon woke her up when he lightly tapped her on her shoulder and said, Mommy, Mommy. This is a 5-year-old that was woke up in the middle of the night to piercing mortal stab wounds. Now, the state that the medical examiner said, yes, it's possible he could have been walking and talking. But he's 5 years old. It's still the middle of the night. He's got pain in his back. You think he's just going to slightly go over here and say, Mommy, Mommy? Darlie says that after he said, Mommy, Mommy, she popped up off the couch and saw the man standing about right here. So not only did the man leave the adult alive, he also left another victim alive, according to the story.
This made me really come awake and realize that there was a man standing down at my feet, walking away from me. I walked after him and heard glass breaking. I got halfway through the kitchen and turned back.
Well, she doesn't mention that this lady doesn't mention that Damon was allegedly followed her to about right here, and she stopped and told him to turn around.
Around to run and turn on the light. I ran back towards the utility room and realized there was a big white-handled knife lying on the floor. It was then that I realized I had blood all over me, and I
see how she mentioned that knife? She mentioned the knife first.
Grabbed the knife, thinking that he was in the garage, so I thought he might still be there, and I yelled for Darren. I ran back through the kitchen and realized the entire living area had blood all over everything. I put the knife on the counter and ran into the entrance, turned on a light, and started screaming for Darren. I think I screamed twice, and he ran out of the bedroom with his jeans on and no glasses, and was yelling, "What is it? What is it?" I remember seeing...
Remember how detailed... Look how detailed she is. He ran out of the bedroom with his jeans on and glasses off. Okay, but she couldn't remember this man's face. There was a lot of things about the attack that she couldn't remember, but she sure remembered that Darren had his jeans on and no glasses. She remembered that detail.
He cut them. He tried to kill me, my neck. He ran down the stairs and into the room where the boys were. I grabbed the phone and called 911. Darren started giving Devin CPR.
She was already on the phone when Darren came down the bottom of the steps.
While I put a towel on my neck and a towel over Damon's back. I remember telling Damon to hang on, Mommy was there. I looked over at Darren and saw the glass table had been knocked halfway off and the flower arrangement had been knocked over. I then stood up and turned around and saw glass all over the kitchen floor. I tried to glance over to see if anything was out of place or if anything was missing.
She's worried about material stuff while her kids are there bleeding. And she even says in the 911 call, and you can listen to this 911 call, and where she gets to the point where she says, somebody who walked in here and intentionally did it, Darren. Then she goes, there's nothing touched. Her mood changed that fast. It was quick.
I was still on the phone with 911 and I don't recall what at all was being said because everything was happening so fast. I went back to Damon and by then he had stopped moving and the police walked through the door. The paramedics came and tried to work on the children. Darren was screaming, who did this, and I started asking if my babies were dead. Darren was crying and said yes. After that, I just remember screaming and showing Darren my neck. Darren took me out to the front of
Darren said she didn't even know she was hurt. But in the statement, she says, I showed him my neck.
The house, and by then, Darren ran upstairs to make sure the baby was okay and then handed him to Karen, our neighbor. I remember them holding a towel on my neck and wrapping my arm, and then they put me in an ambulance.
I remember them holding a towel to my neck and then wrapping my arm. They did this on the porch. Wrapping her neck, I mean. So they were on the porch. They took the towel off of her neck and put a bandage on it. That's the towel that we see in the entranceway that looks like blood with the bandage wrapping right on top of it. Ding, 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 ding. There you go, Rich.
I remember we got to the hospital and then them telling me they were taking me to surgery. They took off my necklace and put me to sleep.
They took off my necklace and put me to sleep. The necklace was so deeply embedded into her wound that it had to be surgically removed, Susan Sarandon. She should stick to Thelma and Louise.
This was the statement of events provided to police by Darlie Routier. After the attack,
Notice in her first statement, she did not mention going back and forth to get towels. She did not mention Darren. Darren said that she tried to help him hold the wound together. She did not mention any of that until she got the house, saw that they took the sink from the house.
Darlie was rushed to hospital to address her wounds. Upon arrival, doctors agreed that due to the nature of her neck wound, the safest course of action was to rush her to the operating room to perform exploratory surgery on her injuries. Dr. Alejandro Santos, the lead doctor who would perform this surgery, noted her wounds as a 9-centimeter laceration in zone 2 of the neck, which had come 2 millimeters from her carotid artery, a laceration on the right arm, which required stitches, and a laceration on her left shoulder. Upon cleaning and tending to the wounds, the exploratory surgery was complete, where Dr. Santos determined the wounds to be superficial. It is important.
Absolutely superficial. Okay, I don't know what she's going to say after this. Darlie's sister, Danelle, will tell you that those wounds were not superficial.
Here to note that the use of the term superficial, as stated in his testimony, is medically defined as a wound that did not go past the platysma in the neck, which is the muscle below the skin and the fat.
Did not go past it. It went into it, but it did not go past it.
It is for this reason, he explained in his testimony, that he used the term superficial to describe the wounds. While Darlie was recovering in the hospital, the police were now faced with one of the most violent and complex homicide investigations their department had ever seen. It wouldn't take long for lead investigator Jimmy Patterson to call in for support, which came in the form of James Cron.
The man. Look at it, Danelle. I know how much you hate him.
A retired crime scene analyst whose take on the case would define the investigation. The scene itself was described to be a bloodbath, marred with overturned tables, pools of blood throughout the home, and the body of Devon still laying in the living room carpet. The investigators' first move was finding the killer's likely point of entry, which was determined to have been through a window on the ground floor of the house, whose screen seemed to have been cut with a knife. Although, upon further inspection, investigators were confused when they found that the window still had a thick layer of dust sitting on the windowsill, still entirely undisturbed. Furthermore, the mulch outside the window was also completely undisturbed, with
There you go, Tracy. The mulch outside the window.
no footprints in sight. Noting these discrepancies, investigators now turn their attention to the rest of the evidence found in the home, most importantly, the murder weapon. The knife that had been used in the attack was taken from the kitchen of the Routiers' own home, and was found on the counter by the sink, dripping with blood. It was placed there by Darlie herself, as she stated in the 911 call. When she found the knife, she had picked it up, getting her prints on the weapon.
She made sure to mention it. And here it says this knife, but what she says is his knife. She wanted to establish an alibi right away. That's not my knife, that's his knife. And I picked it up. And that's why it's still in the house. That's why it's got blood all over it. I have a chance to get rid of it.
All right, okay. We got the prints, baby.
She knew she couldn't get rid of the knife, actually, because they would wonder why one is missing from the block and where it's at.
Now originally, the police's first assumption was that this was a robbery gone wrong, but were quickly confounded when they found that beside the knife was Darlie's jewelry, rings, and bracelets.
Joey's rings and bracelets. I don't know what this is. Is that the key to the Jaguar? That's her wallet.
Left untouched on the counter. With the robbery motive crossed out, the authorities followed the blood through the house. In the kitchen, there was a pool of blood on the floor, blood splatters on the counters near the...
Yeah, see, Darlie did not mention anything about this sink event in her first written statement. She left that completely out about going back and forth from that sink 7 times with towels. She left that out until she realized that they removed this whole sink.
Sink and the cupboards below, but the sink itself seemed to be completely clean. The 2 forensic analysts who examined the scene later said that the sink looked like it had been cleaned of blood. Sure enough, after testing, both the sink and the faucet tested positive for traces of blood. This means that there was blood in the sink at some point, but it had been conveniently cleaned away before the police arrived. This was not the only place lacking blood. As investigators moved throughout the home following the trail of blood the supposed intruder left, the trail stopped inside the house. Even after testing suspicious stains found outside, no traces of blood were detected. In fact, there was nothing beyond the home that indicated that an intruder had been there at all. The discrepancies did not stop here, as police turned to the area where the crime took place. In the living room, they noticed something wrong. The vase atop the coffee table had been thrown to its side, although strangely, neither the glass atop the coffee table nor the vase were broken. A wine rack...
It's crazy because we had Tara, Mystery Maverick, who was telling us on Rich's channel that she thought that the glass table cut Devon. And I had to go into this whole video about tempered glass, and we hear that it's not even broken.
Had been pushed, forcing a wine glass to shatter onto the ground. But as investigators later noted, the pieces were laying on top of the trail of Darlie's blood, suggesting that it had broken after Darlie bled through the kitchen. The same could be said of a vacuum that had supposedly been knocked over during the struggle, yet investigators found bloody footprints and splatters underneath it.
As far as that vacuum, Darlie said that she used that vacuum as a crutch. That vacuum was found in between the kitchen counter where the knife was and the middle like a cooking area in the middle of the kitchen. She's feeling woozy in between that area. And her instinct is to grab that vacuum cleaner and lean on it. Why? When you can just lean on the counters that are right there available to you. It's more logical to lean on the counter.
Along with a clear track in the blood indicating that it was rolled to its spot. To lead investigator Jimmy Patterson and James Cron, each of these
Look,
discrepancies
there's Jimmy Patterson not testifying.
could only mean one thing. The crime scene was staged, and the killer must have come from within the home. This was an inside job. Once this determination was made, police worked quickly to put together their case and collect their evidence in what they described as the most intensive and exhaustive investigation ever conducted by the Rowlett Police Department. Finally, on June 18, 1996, the Rowlett PD moved in.
John and Chip evidence at the crime scene told one story. Darlie Routier's account of that deadly night was
That's Robert Riggs. He's the one that busted Darlie Key lying about the lie detector test. She lied right to him on national TV.
far cry different. Police say it was a vicious, planned attack in which the mother allegedly stabbed her children to death and spun a tale to cover it up.
We believe that the white male suspect, described by Darlie Routier as the man that attacked her and murdered her children, never existed.
Darlie is innocent. I feel that she has not done this. She would barely spank her children, let alone do this to them.
Only 12 days after the deaths of her children, Darlie Routier was arrested on 2 counts of capital murder. News of her arrest sent shockwaves throughout the town and far beyond. A community that had once mourned with her now stood stunned, struggling to reconcile the image of a grieving mother with that
You notice how she says a community that had once mourned with her?
of an accused killer.
If I was defending myself with an intruder, I would die defending my kids, not have a few scratches.
Nope, never believed her. Never. Because if that was my child, I would kill for my child and I would die for my child. I don't think anybody intentionally went into that house and killed those 2 boys.
That's right.
A patient shared this tip with me and saved me hundreds on health insurance. You need to see this. When I had to leave my nursing job,
Neighbors who knew Darlie, whose kids played at her house, posted signs in their front yard professing her innocence. Her family and friends rallied around her, certain that the woman they knew could have never done what the police claimed she had.
We will be very supportive of her. We're still going to love her as much as we do today. And I would trust.
Karen Neal is the lady that lived across the street, the nurse, who they claim paid their mortgage one time, who collected domain and kept Drake for a day. Sitting next to her is her husband, Terry, who also died of cancer.
My children in her care, even if they, like I said, even if they say that they convinced her to say she was guilty, she would never hurt my children. Never.
Never. And now remember, that's somebody that got their mortgage paid by Darlie.
Though not everyone held this belief, and as word spread about the 26-year-old Texas mother arrested for brutally murdering her own children, the media dug their claws into the case. The story burned like wildfire, and with it, Darlie's reputation. Absolutely everything about her was called into question. Her hair, her nails, her body, the way she talked, the way she cried, all of it was fair game to broadcast to the masses. The character assassination had become so extreme that many were now calling her the Texas Susan Smith.
Well, here's the thing about the character assassination. Did they make up anything? Were they really telling you about her character? Yes, they didn't make up nothing.
Comparing her, without solid evidence, to the South Carolina mother who drowned both of her children by strapping them into their car seats and driving her car into the lake. Susan Smith had originally claimed that a black man had kidnapped her children in a carjacking, only for this to have later been exposed as a lie to cover up her own crime. The outrage from this case heavily colored the public's response to Darlie's arrest, indicting her as a killer long before her trial had even taken place.
It's time to stop. She is not a Susan Smith, and we're going to prove this.
But it wasn't just the way that she looked that fed the media fire. At the core of the public's deep disdain of Darlie was a short video taken at Damon and Devon's gravesite only a few days after the murder, on the day of Devon's birthday.
For some, this may seem a strange thing to do in an odd place and time.
Happy birthday, dear Devon.
Singing happy birthday in a cemetery to a son who was brutally stabbed to death just over a week ago.
Love you, Devon and Damon.
But Darlie and Darren Routier say this is appropriate for them and their family. Helium balloons instead of headstones to remember Devon, who would have turned 7 today.
In this short video, which was plastered on the screen of every news outlet in Texas, showed Darlie and her sister spraying silly string on the boy's gravestone while singing happy birthday.
What they don't tell you is that Darlie invited the crew to be there. She invited the news crew to be there.
In it, Darlie seems far from the grieving mother she was expected to be, smiling and chewing gum, and when reporters asked her about why she chose to celebrate them this way, she said
it with a smile.
This was all the public needed to brand her a killer. Their minds were made, and
no, that's not all the public needed to brand her a killer. Without the silly string party, without that weird-ass interview, you still had plenty of circumstantial and physical evidence to show that she did what she did.
Now all that was left was proving it in court. Thus began one of the most closely watched trials in Texas, the State versus Darlie Routier. Following the arrest, the town of Rowlett was flush with news cameras. The case of the killer mom was a hit story across Texas, with thousands tuning in to find out more. As the public eagerly dissected Darlie's life and past, consuming every detail from her fancy home to high-maintenance upkeep, many of those following the case had already made up their mind. The town of Rowlett and the county of Dallas could no longer balance the weight of the public scrutiny while still holding a fair trial with an impartial jury. This is why, in September of 1996, Darlie's court-appointed lawyers asked for her trial to be moved out of Dallas County to nearby Kerr County because of pretrial publicity. However, this motion has come under significant scrutiny, as some suggest that the decision to hold the trial in a smaller, more conservative town like Kerrville, which had one of the highest conviction rates at the time, made it more likely for the jury to favor the prosecution.
How many of Kerr County's conviction rates have been overturned over the years?
It was decisions like these that led the Routiers to dump the court-appointed attorney and mortgage the house to afford big-shot lawyer Doug Mulder.
They did not mortgage the house.
Known as a force to be reckoned with in Texas courtrooms. To supplement his work, Darren also hired a private investigator, ex-FBI agent Lloyd Harrell, to investigate what he believed the police had overlooked.
He's a clown. He got himself kicked out of the trial. He said that when Waddell pulled up, that wasn't Darren that was in the yard. That was an intruder. And that Waddell just went on in the house and let the intruder walk away. But we have Gorsuch's testimony from the side of the house that saw Waddell pull his gun on Darren and take Darren back into the house. This guy's an idiot.
With a star-studded and very expensive team, the Routiers were hopeful that when they walked Darlie through the courthouse doors for opening statements, she would walk back out as a free woman. Unfortunately, this couldn't be further from the truth. As the jury filed in on January 6, 1997, the court sat down to listen to both sides' opening statements. As per usual, the prosecution gave their statement first, presenting Darlie as a self-centered woman, a materialistic woman, and a woman cold enough, in fact, to murder her own 2 children, while the defense quickly followed with their own plea to the jury to see Darlie as an American mother, just like any other number of American mothers. Lawyer Doug Mulder continued to say, "She's not perfect, never said she was. Nobody is ever going to say she was. But the description of becoming a psychotic killer will not be borne out in the evidence. And when you have heard all of that, although you won't know what happened fully at 5801 Eagle, you will know that the evidence does not prove that Darlie Routier committed this crime." Now, the entire trial spanned multiple weeks, with the verdict being delivered almost a month later, in February. In this time, dozens of experts, officers, friends, and family gave their testimonies to either defend Darlie or prove her a killer. And with hundreds of pages of documents, court transcripts, and exhibits, it is impossible for us to cover every single piece of evidence investigated since then. But the main
Darlie has been given more DNA testing, more physical testing than any other Texas death row inmate in history.
Arguments presented by each side have been condensed for you here. Let's start at the beginning, with how the killer got into the home. According to police, the only evidence of forced entry was found in a window located in the utility room of the home, found with a sliced screen, creating a hole large enough for a person to...
And they found it because Darlie led them there. He went out the garage.
Pass through. However, the prosecution had a different idea, and argued that Darlie had cut the screen herself to stage a break-in. They argued that had an intruder really entered the home through this window, there would have been evidence of disturbances in the surrounding area. But upon investigation, authorities found a layer of undisturbed dust still sitting on the windowsill. Not only that, but a plot of mulch positioned at the right of the window also sat completely undisturbed. Running through that mulch would have been the killer's quickest route of escape after leaving the scene, unless they deliberately went 12 feet out of their way to avoid it. Would the killer have really spent precious seconds avoiding a plot of mulch when he was escaping the scene of the crime? Crime scene expert James Cron didn't think so, and made that clear in his testimony in court. Not only this, but investigators also questioned why an intruder would cut the screen to begin with, when removing it was the simplest option. But it wasn't.
Even the expert, Charles Lynch, when Mosty was cross-examining him, he said, well, about cutting the screen. And Charles Lynch said, I'd just take it off. So did Tommy Lynn Sells, the serial killer that they used to accuse of this crime. He would just take the screens off, is what he said.
Just the window and the area surrounding it. Upon investigation through the home, experts found a microscopic fiber clinging to one of the knives in the kitchen's knife block. The fiber was made of fiberglass rods and rubber, almost identical to the makeup of the window screen. This meant, to the investigators at least, that the knife that was used to cut the window screen came from inside the Routier's own kitchen. In their view, this pointed to a staged break-in, one carried out not by an intruder, but by Darlie herself. Now, the evidence surrounding the window seemed pretty damning when described by the prosecution, but the defense had a different take. According to some, the undisturbed dust on the windowsill was easily explained by the fact that the window was close enough to the ground that an intruder could have passed through easily.
Now watch. That is Randy Reagan. It's Darren's cousin. But I want you to see something here.
Without having to touch.
They say that they don't have to touch the window, but if you look at this window, you can see that about 4 inches of it is missing. The whole window's gone, along with the screen when they do this test.
The windowsill at all. The defense even had an explanation for the most damning piece of evidence, the fiber on the knife. Fibers by nature are extremely small and light, easily transferred from one item to another. Considering only one intact fiber was found on the knife, the defense attributed its discovery to the investigation's order of events.
Wrong.
When dusting for fingerprints, the investigators dusted the window first, and then moved on to the knife block, making it entirely possible that upon dusting the window for fingerprints, a fiber could have clung to the brush and been transferred to the knife block.
Except they proved that the brushes from the fingerprint brush were much thicker than the screen fiber that was found
when it was dusted later on. Although this wasn't enough to absolve Darlie from suspicion, it was enough for many to cast doubt on the prosecution's evidence. Although it was not just physical evidence that the prosecution relied on to convince the jury of Darlie's guilt. Throughout the trial, lawyer for the prosecution Greg Davis relied heavily on Darlie's alleged lack of emotion to prove that she was a person capable of killing her own children. This argument was not a difficult one to make, as the media and news cameras had already captured Darlie's every move since her release from the hospital and broadcasted it nationwide, allowing anyone to become an armchair expert on her behavior. The allegations of inappropriate grieving began the night her children were murdered, beginning from the moment she made the 911 call. Some called her uncooperative when the operator was trying to get information with her. Others also pointed out that she mentioned on the phone that when she picked up the knife, she got her fingerprints on it, saying, The prosecution were quick to point to this as evidence of guilt, saying that rather than being concerned with the state of her dying children, she was instead concerned about fingerprint evidence. But the emotionless allegations do not stop here. Even the first officer on the scene, Officer Waddell, stated that when he arrived, he found Darlie simply standing there, and did not comply when he told her multiple times to put pressure on Damon's wounds. When asked whether he believed that Darlie was in a state in which she could lend assistance to her children, Officer Waddell said yes, stating, "Well, she appeared to know everything that was going on inside the house. She was real alert and able to tell me what had happened. I thought if she was worried about fingerprints on a knife, she could certainly take care of her kids."
Yes.
Even as paramedics were carrying Damon's body out of the home, he noticed that Darlie never once asked if Damon was okay or where they were taking him. At the hospital, nurses testified that Darlie was speaking with a flat effect and withdrawn, not overtly emotional. But for the prosecution and the jury, the nail in the coffin came down to the item that defined the case, the silly string video.
That did not. Even the juror said, you take the silly string out. Even the lead juror, Rena Way, said, if you take it out, you still have all the
The
other.
video had made the rounds from news channel to news channel, showing the elaborate setup from the balloons to the banner, and a smiling, gum-chewing Darlie spraying silly string on the boys' headstones. Some likened it to dancing on their graves. Although, however visceral the people's reaction was to the video, and the image the prosecution presented of Darlie, the defense was quick to remind the jury that the descriptions given here were of a woman who had just seen her children murdered. A woman who was likely traumatized and in shock. Who are we to pass judgment on how we think she should have grieved? Not only this, but the defense also brought in multiple witnesses who interacted with Darlie after her children's deaths, who stated that she was very clearly grieving when they interacted with her. Karen White, Darlie's neighbor, David Rogers, her pastor, Dana
Karen White? It says Karen Neal right here. David Rogers, this guy went to see her 50 times in jail.
Godfrey, her friend, Cara Byford, and the list goes on, all claiming that they watched Darlie grieve appropriately. Although, many refute these testimonies by pointing out that they all came from people who were already friends of Darlie's, and therefore were unlikely to testify against her.
Damn.
Although the defense did not only bring testimonies from Darlie's friends, but also called into question the notes taken by the nurses at the hospital, where there are multiple instances in which they document that Darlie was crying, visibly upset, and very emotional, contradicting their original testimonies describing her flat effect.
Wasn't their original testimony. They testified to that after. You got to remember that focus notes are only for what's going on right now. They're not for opinions. They can't give their opinions on focus notes.
As for their most damning piece of evidence, the silly string tape, Darlie's defense attorney has often been criticized for not presenting a secret police recording of a somber memorial service held at the gravesite earlier that day. When questioned about the recording in court, the police officers pled the fifth to avoid self-incrimination, a decision that many consider shocking to this day.
They only pled the fifth after they were accused of a crime. Let me go back here. That's Darlie sitting right there. She's sitting. Everyone else has their heads bowed and praying.
Court, the police officers pled the fifth to avoid self-incrimination, a decision that many consider shocking to this day. Now, along with the physical evidence in the home and the analysis of her emotional state, the prosecution were now ready to call into question the evidence of guilt found on Darlie herself, her wounds. With both boys having been stabbed so violently and deeply that the knife went all the way through the body, why was it that Darlie's wounds were considered superficial? Why wouldn't the killer exert the same amount of force towards killing Darlie herself?
That's right. The method of attack. Just, Alan Brantley, the FBI profiler, talked about the method of attack and how different it was, compared to the boys having straight down wounds that were going through vital organs, as to Darlie's, which were just slices. And it was also mentioned, on Crime Weekly, if you can watch, with Stephanie Harlow and Derek Levasseur, who is a private detective. He was very concerned about the wounds being different.
According to the prosecution, this is because there was no killer at all. The story the state presents is that Darlie, after stabbing and killing both of her boys, then turns the knife on herself, not to kill, but to maim just enough to make the police believe that she was a victim as well. Their evidence is as follows. The first main point made by the prosecution was the severity of Darlie's cuts. The surgeon treating Darlie upon her arrival at the hospital described Darlie's injuries as superficial and inconsistent with other defensive wounds he had seen in his career. Apart from her visible injuries, Darlie was also found to have severe and extensive bruising on both of her arms, but these bruises were not documented during her hospital visit because, according to the nurses, they were never there. Multiple nurses who treated Darlie the morning of July 6 stated during their testimonies that the bruises that were photographed on Darlie's arms were not present during her initial visit to the hospital, and Darlie showed no signs of pain or discomfort in those areas. The bruises only appeared after she left the hospital, leading many to claim that Darlie inflicted these bruises on herself after she came home from the hospital to further her story of being attacked. But it wasn't just the nature of the injuries, but where they took place that was also reason for suspicion. Darlie, in all of her testimonies, was never clear exactly where and when her injuries took place.
No, I didn't sleep through that. I mean, How would anybody sleep through something like that?
But yet you say you don't remember.
But I don't remember. Can you imagine waking up out of your sleep with a man attacking you?
Well, what do you think happened then if you can't remember?
But you didn't wake up to a man attacking you. You woke up to Damon tapping your shoulder. You didn't wake up to him attacking you.
You don't think you slept through it?
I think that I tried to fight with a man, and I think that he either knocked me unconscious, or I think that when, he
All right,
slipped
if he was able to knock her unconscious, where's the bruise?
my throat or whatever, I think I passed out.
The prosecution uses this lack of certainty to provide their own theory, which was that after the murder, Darlie used the knife to cut her own neck and arm over the kitchen sink to self-inflict her own injuries. Evidence for this theory included the blood splatters found on the counter by the sink, the blood in
Remember, she didn't mention any of this, the sink, at all in her first statement.
front of the sink, and the suspiciously cleaned up blood in the sink itself. Along with this, according to experts, the blood splatters found on the kitchen floor were indicative of someone standing still, rather than someone in movement, say chasing after a killer, as Darlie claimed to be. Dr. Vincent DeMaio, chief medical examiner for Bexar County, who testified for the defense during the trial, and stated that not only were Darlie's injuries consistent with self-defense, but also were very unlikely to have been self-inflicted. According to him, the neck wound specifically was concerning, as not only did it come dangerously close to a carotid artery, which is an unlikely risk for someone to take when self-inflicting wounds, but both major wounds, the one on her arm and shoulder, were both found on the right side of her body. Darlie is right-handed, meaning that both of these wounds had to have been made by her non-dominant left hand.
Why couldn't they have been?
She still could have inflicted the injuries with her right hand, but the angle would have been very imprecise and uncomfortable, and it is extremely unlikely that she would take that risk. In terms of the bruising, the defense called up a number of witnesses, including Cara Byford, a friend of Darlie's who claims that she distinctly remembered seeing the bruising on Darlie's arms when she visited her in the hospital. The defense's medical expert, Dr. Vincent DeMaio, also stated that upon examination of the photos of her bruising and its coloration, the bruises present on Darlie's arms could definitely have been inflicted on the night of June 6 during the attack, and are consistent with defensive wounds received during a struggle. One of the first concerns that police had, and the origin of their suspicion towards Darlie, was the many inconsistencies they found in her story. There were many instances in which Darlie changed her story, contradicted herself, and changed key points of the events of the night. Firstly, throughout the many testimonies and interrogations Darlie underwent, her account of events, including her description of the killer, are constantly changing. In her initial statement, she claimed she saw the intruder walking away and chased him out. In later versions, she said she awoke to him on top of her and fought him off on the sofa. She never clarified where the struggle occurred, casting doubt on whether it happened at all. These inconsistencies led prosecutors to question what they had called her selective amnesia. Furthermore, the night of the murder, Darlie said she slept in the living room because baby Drake's movements would usually wake her up. If this is true, many question how she could then sleep through the brutal stabbings of two of her children undisturbed. The inconsistencies did not stop here, as one of the main ones was the issue of the damage found at the scene. Upon entry, police noted an overturned glass-top coffee table with the glass top unbroken. There was also a vase toppled over and a lamp askew, but neither item was severely damaged. During the struggle, a wine rack was apparently pushed, breaking a glass, and a vacuum cleaner was tipped. However, blood was found beneath both items, not on top. If Darlie had been bleeding and chasing the attacker as she claimed, there should have been blood on top as well. Investigators also noted blood streaks suggesting the vacuum was rolled into place, leading to the claim that these items were staged after the fact and not during the attack. The prosecution used all of this evidence to posit the theory that Darlie, after killing her children, staged the crime scene before calling 911 to pin the murder on a mystery intruder, one she couldn't even describe to police. This was a bold and difficult claim to rebuke, but the prosecution used all of this evidence to posit the theory that Darlie, after killing her children, staged the crime scene before calling 911 to pin the murder on a mystery intruder, one she couldn't even describe to police.
See, these are early court hearings. And notice, Dana is sitting right next to Darren. Darlie Key caught wind of this footage and stopped that from happening again. What was going on with Darren and Dana? We've always believed there was something there. What's the family think about what was going on with Dana and Darren? Do they know something that they're not telling us? Or would they tell us if they knew that Darren and Dana were having an inappropriate relationship? Would they make that public? No, they wouldn't, because that's just another stressor that led to Darlie losing her fucking mind that night.
This was a bold and difficult claim to rebuke, but the defense had a plan. With their own expert, a former FBI investigator, they investigated the claims of staging and stated that Darlie's testimony was not indicative of someone who staged the crime scene. He referred to the way that she described the events of the night and the fact that she did not bring up the damaged items until asked about it by the police. He explained that
she didn't need to bring up the damaged items until asked about it by police because they speak for themselves. People say she didn't say anything about the staging, but when the police walk in, they'll see the flipped over table. They'll see the screen cut. She doesn't say, well, there's a screen cut, this table slipped over, blah, blah, blah. She didn't need to because it spoke for itself.
People who stage crime scenes usually mention the staged items right away to make sure their efforts aren't
Like the knife. I already picked it up.
Looked. As for the changes in the story, the defense called a forensic psychologist who examined Darlie for hours after the murders and testified that Darlie was likely experiencing traumatic amnesia.
Remember, forensic psychology is not based on science,
which causes a person who has undergone a traumatic event to forget certain parts of their memory of the event. Explain.
But she sure remembered that Darren didn't have his glasses on and he put his pants on. She also remembered what they made for dinner that night, who put the dishes away, who fed the baby their last bottle. She remembers all that.
Her changing story. Aside from this, the defense also called into question the reliability of the police's notes, specifically whether they even took notes at all. Upon cross-examination, attorney Doug Mulder questioned various officers who were on the scene the night of the murder and found that very few of them were taking notes on their findings. But the most significant and detrimental piece of evidence that supported the argument of the defense was the presence of a single sock, found 75 yards down the road from the routine.
Now let's discuss this sock a little bit. I've been there. I've seen that spot. I think that that Darlie tried to throw it down the drain. But on this sock, you have two about a nickel-sized blood spots of Devin and Damon on the outside of the sock. On the inside toe of the sock, you have Darlie's skin cells. What you don't have, and what is very telling about this sock, what tells the story, is the lack of Darlie's blood on that sock. This intruder was alleged to have wore the sock, and he's close down to Darlie's face, and he runs that knife 9 centimeters across, or 9 inches across her neck, and there's not a single spot of Darlie's blood on that sock. And it was mentioned that she had a splurting wound. Most of the blood that you see in the house is Darlie's. How did Darlie's not get on that sock if an intruder used it as a glove? And why was her skin cells on the inside toe? Some people say, well, that's because, she was doing the laundry. Wrong. Helena Kazban testified that she did the laundry. She's the housekeeper. She did the laundry.
To your home. On the sock, investigators found the blood of both Damon and Devin Routier. This finding cast a huge wrench in the prosecution's arguments because it calls into question the timeline. According to the state, after killing her children, Darlie inflicted her own superficial injuries, staged the scene, and then called 911 and stated.
Well, she could have staged most of the scene before she did any of the killing. She could have flipped the table over and put that plant over without the kids waking up. She could have slipped out that back sliding door behind her couch and cut that screen and put that knife back in the thing without the kids waking up. Most of the staging could have been done right before she did the killings.
On the line until police and first responders arrived. But with the added evidence of the sock, the entire timeline falls apart. According to experts, after being stabbed, Damon could have only survived at most 9 minutes.
There we go with another mistake. No medical expert said that Damon could have only lived 9 minutes. What they said was, as far as minutes and how long it would take him to die, is you can't tell. That's exactly what they said. You can't tell. This is a lie. This 9 minutes.
his injuries before he died. If we start from the moment Damon was stabbed and we end with his death at most 9 minutes later.
Now, when was the last time Damon was stabbed? We think he was attacked twice.
6 of those minutes can be accounted for with the 911 call, and paramedics arrived within a minute after the call ended and found Damon still alive. Taking all of this into account, Darlie would have only had at most 2 minutes to get both boys blood on the sock, run 75 yards down the street, drop the sock, run 75 yards back to the house, injure herself, stage the crime scene, and clean the sink before calling 911. For reference, 75 yards is 3/4 the length of a football field. This would have been almost impossible. For many,
no, it's not. You saw me walk it in less than a minute, and I got a bad back, barely walk. I walked it.
The singular sock became the piece of evidence that held up Darlie's innocence, and there was little the prosecutors could do to dispel the issue of the timeline.
Yeah, well, there is no issue of the timeline. Again, if you look at Dr. Janice Parchman Townsend, she's the medical examiner that was questioned by Mosty, I believe, and he kept trying to say, could it have been 5 minutes? Could it have been 6 minutes? Could it have been 7 minutes? The final answer on how long would it take Damon to die was you can't tell. There was never 9 minutes.
But one of the main questions that still remained in the minds of many was the issue of a motive. Darlie was well liked in her community, known as a kind, caring mother and a supportive neighbor. How could someone like this be capable of killing her own children?
Ted Bundy was also well liked.
Prosecution's answer to this question came down to what many would consider character assassination. To counter the image of the quintessential American mother, the state instead painted a different picture, one of a selfish, narcissistic woman who cared only for herself and her image.
Several times this morning, prosecutor Greg Davis approached Routier, pointed at her, and said she killed her sons. The last time he did, she responded by calling him a liar.
Leaning into the media's coverage of the family's living, many posited the theory that their financial troubles, expensive lifestyle, and Darlie's postpartum depression all came together to push her to kill her children for the life insurance money.
Approached Routier, pointed at her, and said she killed her sons. The last time he did, she responded by calling him a liar.
Leaning into the media's coverage of the family's living,
there's Dana and Darlie Key, but interestingly,
many posited the theory that their financial troubles, expensive lifestyle.
Okay, that is Dana Routier. That is Darren's brother Dion's wife, who you see on the Lisa Gibbons show, acting as a spectator, giving questions to Lisa.
And Darlie's postpartum depression all came together to push her to kill her children for the life insurance money they would gain in their deaths.
Children are costly. Children demand attention. Children demand money. And if you eliminate those children, you eliminate those needs and those demands of the children.
Although many people were quick to see the faults in this theory, pointing first to the fact that if Darlie wanted to kill the source of her stress, why only kill the 2 older boys and not the infant that required the most amount of attention? Not only this, but the life insurance for each boy would have only paid out to $5,000 per child, meaning the payout for this brutal murder would not even have been enough to cover the boys' funeral expenses.
Yeah, we know it wasn't about money.
If she was
about the lack of money.
Really in it for the money, why not kill Darren, whose life insurance policy payout was $800,000, more than enough for all 4 of them to live comfortably. Regardless of the holes in the motive argument, the prosecution does not need a motive to convict, only evidence that proves beyond reasonable doubt that Darlie committed the crimes. And for the jury, they had heard enough.
We're very optimistic. We think that after the arguments, the jury considers all the evidence that they'll do the right thing.
I feel great about the case. I think we did exactly what we set out to do, and that is we've proved beyond any reasonable doubt this woman is guilty of killing her 2 children.
Routier's family has been seen with their heads bowed around the courthouse, but they say it's not because of defeat.
We're praying.
That's not a look of beaten.
Yeah.
People put their heads down doesn't mean they're beaten.
No, we're not beaten until this is over.
I started telling Darlie yesterday and today that she should prepare herself for a death sentence because I thought the handwriting was on the wall and that she should be prepared for it.
After a month of testimonies from medical experts, friends, family, and investigators, on February 1st, 1997, the jury passed down a guilty verdict. Darlie Routier would be sentenced to death by lethal injection.
You fight. That's what you do.
Just fight. Just fight. Just keep on and on and on until you're dead.
Will you ever quit?
No.
What's your goal? You'll never quit.
I'll never quit.
Why?
For the truth. Justice
And he quit. He quit.
has not been served.
You think we're just going to quit and lay down, John? On this part? How do you feel about it?
It was Danelle that said Greg Davis is a killer.
The truth. Justice has not been served.
You think we're just going to quit and lay down, John? On this part? How do you feel about it?
Bless her heart. Bless her little heart. I feel sorry for her when I see this stuff. I really do.
Lying. They're all lying. Greg Davis is a killer.
They're all lying.
I don't know if anything I'd do differently. It's just.
Devastated, Darlie's family did what they could to attempt to appeal the decision. Hoping for a retrial, the defense argued that the transcripts compiled by stenographer Sandra Halsey were inaccurate, but the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals rejected their objection and upheld the conviction. Although, in the years following, Darlie's defense attorneys have filed for a request for new DNA testing, but the testing has yet to be completed. With years' worth of new evidence and changes in the way that
There's no new evidence.
the case is presented, some have even changed their initial opinions. Most notably, a jury member serving in the trial has now stated that they regret their decision to pass down a guilty verdict and would.
That's Charlie Sanford, and he worked at the Kerrville Mental Hospital. He said he didn't see the pictures of the bruising that was passed around.
Not support this decision given the information that they have now. Author of Precious Angels, a book detailing Darlie's murder and heavily supporting Darlie's guilty verdict, has now come out stating that she's changed her mind and no longer believes that she received a fair trial and that she may not be guilty at all. In the years following the highly publicized trial and sentencing, Darlie's case has become infamous, with entire books and archives dedicated to proving either her innocence or her guilt. The case became a moral battleground, and with the amount of information surrounding it, it's almost impossible to be sure of the truth. Even in this video, there was still much we were not able to cover. Countless pieces of evidence, from the bloodstain pattern analysis to Darren's attempted insurance fraud plan to the mysterious black car seen on Darlie Street the night of the murders, all of
No mysterious black car.
these could not be covered because ultimately, in the end, they did not change the outcome of the case.
It wasn't a big shock. Guilty.
Is it? Oh my.
Bizarre. I don't understand it.
Comes into a neighborhood like this and just breaks in and murders two boys and doesn't take anything, and that's really hard to believe.
I believe Darlie's innocent. I don't care what the verdict is, and we're going to fight it. We're gonna stand next to her family all the way.
Darlie was convicted of capital murder and to this day sits on death row at the Mountain View unit in Gatesville, Texas. Whether she deserves it or not is up to you.
What do you think? That's right, Rich. I see you, buddy. You interviewed a kid that said they called it the Nintendo house, but where did he hear that from? Where did he hear that from? Did he hear it on the news? Because you have all this footage of Darlie's house and family and stuff, but you don't have footage of a bunch of kids just there randomly. You don't. But that's neither here nor there. That's neither here nor there about the Nintendo house. I personally have a problem with Darlie wanting all these kids to be in her house all the time, but she needed to hire a babysitter for her own. Does that make sense to you? It doesn't to me. But at any rate, yeah, see, the thing of it is, Rich, is you say, I follow you. You say, I have, Mr. St. John, interviewed a child in the neighborhood that told me they called it the Nintendo house. I can't reveal his name. So it means nothing, Rich. You can't reveal their name. It means nothing. But, you know, the fact that they call it the Nintendo house, that's neither here nor there. I don't know. You tell me what you think. Comment on the video. Y'all have a good day now. Peace and chicken grease. And remember, justice for Devin and Damon.